Hello, Audioholics. This is Logan, and welcome back to Album Reviews on Audioholics Anonymous. Today, we will be reviewing the brand new Architects album, For Those Who
Yeah.
Wish to Exist, and For Those
I
Who Wish to
mean,
Care. Here is Tyler.
I think should we even be reviewing this album? We don't wish to exist. It's not for us.
Yeah, reviews
That's
over.
yeah,
Finals.
that's been fun.
Yeah, it's been fun. Final score 0 out of 10.
It's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. All right, so now that we've had the comedic relief, I'm going to bring the room
Tyler is
down and
going to
talk about my
hijack this
history.
episode. Yeah.
Yeah, so my history with Architects, this is a very personal band for me because I found them in 2018. This album came out a few months after my grandmother passed away. And like that might not be a huge deal to some people, but she was literally like a second mother to me. She was in the room when I was born. She lived with me my entire life. We were super close, just as close as I am with my own mother. So when she passed, that was a huge thing. And the reason why this album, Holy Hell, when it came out in 2018 in November, hit me so hard is because it was actually about grief. It was about the guitarist and songwriter of the band, Tom Cyril, who had passed away due to melanoma, cancer, for those who don't know. So the whole album is basically a concept album on grief and pain, and it was a very important album for me that year. It helped me get through my own grief and helped me cope with my own pain through that time. And this is the first album that the band will have made after that album. So their main songwriter had died, and they wrote Holy Hell as basically a tribute. Like I said, a concept album on grief about him. And this is their first album full of original new material without Tom, that isn't about him, not made in his style or his tribute or anything like that. They were completely free to go in any direction that they wanted to go with this new album. In fact, for a while, it was up in the air that they might just disband. They might even not make another album. But they did decide to, and so we have Architects for Those Who Wish to Exist. Needless to say, due to my history with their last album, I had high expectations. I really was looking forward to this album, but I knew it was never going to meet those expectations because that album, Holy Hell, is such a personal and emotional album to me. I knew this would never get there, but I have to say it got close. This is a fucking fantastic album. I really love the experimentation that they did in this record and the new directions that they took. When Tom was in the band, when he wrote the lyrics, it was a very heavy band. It was just much heavier than it is in this album. They were allowed to take a softer, more experimental approach in this record, and I really appreciate that. I believe that actually the songwriting is better now as a result of it. I would say overall Holy Hell is a better album. Holy Hell I would say is a 10 out of 10 album. But this is right up there with it. In fact, I rate this a 9.6. Literally only zero point 0.4 away from a 10 out of 10. And the reason for that, the vocals are so impressive. I mean, Sam has always had great vocals, but on this album, he really shows his range. He can do the heavy stuff that he did on previous albums still, like the tortured screams and the harsh vocals and things like that. But he can also sing in a more soft way, which he'd experimented on a bit in Holy Hell, but he really perfected it on this album. And his cleans are just atmospheric, emotional. They're perfect. The instrumental aspect is much more inspired. It's not just things that like metalcore often implements. There's more interesting variety. There's a bigger variety of soundscapes on the album as a whole. More atmospheric stuff going on. As I said, huge improvement on the songwriting. Like I said, the songwriting before was never weak per se within the last two albums, but it's so well done here. Just the sheer variety of music that you get on this record. You get all the heavy shit from previous records, but you also get like really well done ballads, mainstream rock songs, and everything in between. And it all works with the context of the full track. And there's so many memorable songs on this album: Black Lungs, Dead Butterflies, Discourse is Dead, Impermanence, Libertine. I could really just go on and on. Pretty much every song on this album works. Every song is memorable. Animals, Giving Blood, Flight Without Feathers was really experimental and atmospheric. Goliath had or no, it wasn't Goliath. Was it Goliath? Yeah, it was. Goliath had a feature from Simon Neil. That shit was fucking insane. And of course, Impermanence had a feature from Winston McCall of Parkway Drive, and that was fucking awesome too. So 9.6 out of 10 is my score. This is one of my favorite albums of the year so far. If it doesn't make my top 5, probably even my top 2, I will be very surprised.
So I am actually kind of regretting my score now because of your review. Like for example, I don't so here's where I am. I don't think I'm in the right place to be reviewing this album. Like I'm not as familiar with metalcore as Tyler is.
But that's okay. Fresh perspective is
Um
always good. We should be talking about what it's like for people who aren't into the genre to
yes.
listen to this album.
So for me, I would say this is the most successful or no, I'm sorry. The most um what's the word I'm thinking for? Accessible rather. The most accessible Architects album I've heard.
For sure.
Um I I did not see objective value in the performance though. Like the vocals, I rated an 8 out of 10, and the instrumentals, I rated a 6.5 out of 10. And my basic reasoning for both of those is that the instrumentals are about average and the vocals are quite a bit above average, but not anything too noteworthy. Now that you're describing it, I'm like looking back and I'm realizing no, they probably are. They probably are something noteworthy, but I will keep my scores just for the sake of consistency. Songwriting, though, of course, that is the mainstay of every Architect record, and it is for this one as well. It's nearly a perfect score. Black Lungs is probably the highlight, rather, the highlight for me. I mean, this is just a really good album, and I think this flow, like overall, the flow of the album is really good as well. It flows pretty well on its own as an album, and there are a collection of good singles that work well on their own as well. I'm not a huge fan of this album personally. Again, I'm uh fortunately, I suppose you could say, very privileged in that I have not had some of the more negative life experience that Tyler has, but I can very easily see how he can get something out of albums like this, out of Holy Hell. And this album has, I think, what did this hit number 1 or number 2? It's like one
Number
of the
one.
most number 1. It's one of the most popular albums right now.
Yeah, that's pretty insane. Architects actually released a statement like we don't even believe it. We literally wrote this expecting it not to chart at all.
Yeah. So
They
I mean
expected
like
people to hate it actually because it's such a departure from their previous
yeah,
albums.
exactly. So I mean, well, I mean, I think the more accessible nature, because like, when
They might have
Slipknot
hit
came,
like a really nice approach, like with the Black Album.
yeah,
A really
exactly,
nice vibe.
and even Slipknot's new album, I think the reason that it charted is that it's not accessible, but it is accessible as compared to something like Iowa.
Oh yeah,
So,
for sure.
so like I think I can understand now why bands like Slipknot, like how bands like Slipknot and Architects have managed to find this middle ground of you know, being heavy but not like not being too heavy for the casual listener, but not being too poppy for the hardcore fans. Hardcore fans liked this. Hardcore fans are sure to like this album. newcomers who want something that's, not that's, a step up from Slayer can come up can easily get themselves into this album. I think this album has some really good appeal. Overall
Yeah.
though, and this is my personal opinion, I give it a 7.8 out of 10. It's not something that I see myself really getting into, but I understand that it does have objective appeal.
One thing I want to add real quick, since neither of us
Yes.
talked about it, the lyricism on this album is actually really on point. It's largely about climate change and
Yes.
the sort of reaction people have had to that and the fact that we're not progressing. Although I doubt this will be the best protest record on climate change we'll get this year, since Gojira is putting something out later,
Oh
but
god, yeah.
it's still a really good protest record. I always like it when bands protest the lack of response to climate change, because I think that's the biggest, most pressing issue that we face today.
I agree. I agree.
So if any of you have some extra money to donate to charities to help along this unfortunately halted progress, do that. I know I will be. So to wrap things up, his score was
7.8 out of 10.
mine was
Yours is a
9.6. So together we get 8.7
point
out of
7.
10 on the
Yeah.
Audioholics scale.
And I was literally, and I will add that I was literally going to change the score while he was talking, but he stopped talking before I could do that. So realistically, it should probably be about a 9. Objectively, this is a very good album. Don't take my personal criticisms of the album to heart. This is a good album, and if you're an Architects fan, go out and listen to it.
Yeah. So what did you guys think about the album? Did you listen to it yet? If not, do that. But if you have, tell us what you thought of it in the comments section below. So without further ado, we bid you
Audio
audio
do.
do.
Bye,
See you later.
everyone.